Every now and then a book comes along that's, well, it's more than just a story. It becomes a cultural landmark, one that really changes how we talk about huge topics like life, death, and what it all means. Today, we're diving into one of those books, Paul Kalanithi's incredible memoir, When Breath Becomes Air. So before we even get into the story itself, you've got to understand the sheer impact this thing had. It wasn't just another memoir. What Dr. Paul Kalanithi wrote became a true global phenomenon. I mean, check this out. 68 weeks. For 68 consecutive weeks, this book was on the New York Times bestseller list. That's more than a year of being one of the most read books in the entire country. Just incredible. And this wasn't just an American thing, not by a long shot. Its message went global, reaching people and starting conversations in 39 different languages. So you have to ask, right? What was it about this particular story, this particular life, that struck such a deep, universal chord with so many people? Okay, let's get into the heart of it. The story begins at what should have been the absolute peak of a person's life and career. We're introduced to this brilliant neurosurgeon just about to cross the finish line after a decade of incredibly demanding training. So you've got this guy, Dr. Paul Kalanithi. He's 36, he's at Stanford, he's winning prestigious awards, fielding job offers from the best universities. The life he had worked so hard for was right there, literally within his grasp. And then, in just about the cruelest twist of fate you can possibly imagine, the expert who had spent years analyzing countless scans just like this one was forced to read his own. The diagnosis? Stage 4 lung cancer. Terminal. And just like that, in a single moment, the future that he and his wife, Lucy, had so carefully built together, it just vanished. It evaporated. So what do you do with that kind of news? Faced with this impossible new reality, Kalanithi didn't surrender. Instead, he turned to the two great passions that had always guided his life to try and make sense of it all. See, he'd always sort of lived in two worlds. On one hand, science. He believed neuroscience could explain the physical mechanics of the brain. But on the other hand, you have literature, which he saw as the best way to understand human meaning. Now, he needed both, more than ever, to understand what was happening to him. And really, his diagnosis forces him, and by extension us, the readers, to confront one of the biggest questions anyone can ever face. What do you do when you suddenly run out of time? And his answer to that question is, wow, it's really captured in this one quote. His wife, Lucy, was worried that having a child would make his dying infinitely harder. And his response was, wouldn't it be great if it did make it really hard? Just think about that for a second. So, instead of pulling back from life, he leaned in. He and Lucy made the incredible choice to have a daughter, Katie. They decided to embrace that immense joy, even knowing that it would make the inevitable goodbye so much more painful. So after Paul's death in 2015, the book was published, and the reception was absolutely overwhelming. But it's really interesting because it wasn't universally praised. You had people like the fellow physician author, Atul Gawande, and tons of other critics just hailing it as monumental, unforgettable, and a vital piece of literature that you just couldn't ignore. But not everyone agreed. Some reviewers actually found his philosophical reflections to be cluttered, even boring. One particularly harsh critic gave it a 1 out of 10, calling it a waste of time and saying he struggled to even finish it. And this is what I find so fascinating, because even that critic, the one who gave it a 1 out of 10, had to admit that the book's epilogue, written by his wife Lucy, was powerful, moving, beautiful, bold, and breaking. Even the biggest detractors couldn't deny the power in its final pages. Ultimately, when you step back, the legacy of When Breath Becomes Air isn't really about bestseller lists or critical reviews. It's about the profound and necessary conversation that it reignited. Yeah, it really took its place alongside these other essential works that courageously look mortality right in the eye. Books like The Last Lecture or A Man's Search for Meaning. These aren't just books about dying. They're books that compel all of us to think about how we live. You see, by choosing to become a writer when he could no longer be a surgeon, Paul didn't just find a new task to do. He found a new identity, a new way to live with purpose, right up to the very end. His wife, Lucy, later said this Nietzsche quote just captured Paul's final months perfectly. His purpose, his why, was to write this book, to leave this message for his daughter and for the world. And that gave him the strength to endure an almost unbearable how. In the end, Kalanithi's story doesn't give us a neat, tidy answer. It doesn't wrap it all up in a bow. Instead, it leaves us with the exact same question he had to face, a question that echoes long after the final page is turned. What makes a life worth living?